Dear learners, welcome back to your educational channel Learn and Educate. We will be studying about the definition of centralization and decentralization as given by Earl Strong, wherein decentralization is about the division of a group of functions and division of a group of activities into relatively autonomous units, independent units, which have overall authority and responsibility for their operation delegated to head of each unit. It is about how a grouping is made, a division of group of functions and a group of activities into relatively independent units, and those units have the authority, the responsibility to take decisions about the operations which are delegated to the head of each unit. And those autonomous units have the power, their head, the person who is assigned the responsibility, they have the power to, with respect to the operations they do. This is decentralization as per all strong, wherein work is not divided into autonomous unit in case of centralization, and the work is divided in case of decentralization. In case of decentralization, division of work into separate units, and each unit is given its own authority and responsibility to operate independently. Wherein decentralization means the division of work divided into separate units, and each such unit is given own authority and responsibility to operate independently. Where in the case of centralization, it is about the work is not divided into autonomous units, and our authority and responsibility remains at the top. Wherein the decentralization, it introduces the meaning as the division of a group of functions and activities that is splitting in collection of major tasks and daily operations. Work is split into different parts. Work is split into different parts and relatively into autonomous units converted into reasonable extent self-governing and independent departments and divisions. These parts become semi-independent departments with overall authority and responsibility. With overall authority and responsibility, there is a power to decide, the total and complete power to decide, and accountability, which means that each unit is given full power and accountability for their operations, that is, their day to day functioning. They manage their own daily work. It is about how delegated to each head of each unit. The delegation of the work for operations to each unit given and transferred to the manager or editor of every department. Each department head gets decision making power and responsibilities. Thus, how introduces the meaning of decentralization as the work which is split into different parts, and these parts become semi-independent departments, and each unit is given full power and authority for managing their own daily work. Each department gets its own decision-making power and responsibility. Decentralization means division of work into separate departments and giving each department head the authority and the responsibility to run their own unit independently. Thus, when the function is divided into autonomous unit and authority and responsibility is delegated to each unit, then organization is decentralized. In the case of centralization, authority and responsibility remains at the top. Departments have little independence, and when the functions are not divided, from the definitions perspective, when the functions are not divided into autonomous units, and there is no delegation of authority and responsibility to the unit heads, wherein the grouping doesn't happen, and this organization is centralized. Therefore, centralization means authority and responsibility remains at the top. Department have little independence, and there are few points. The components of definition are division of work, breaking work into functions and activities. In the case of decentralization, creating semi-independent departments or divisions, power to make decisions, authority, power to make decisions within the unit, the responsibility, that is the accountability for the performance and results, the delegation, transfer of authority to each unit heads, and thus the manager is responsible for each department, wherein the dividing, functioning, splitting the activities, operations, autonomous independent units, they are divided as per depending upon the functions and tasks and they have the responsibility, authority for decision making power, and accountability for the work and functions which are transferred, delegated to the heads and the manager of each unit. Therefore, centralization is the concentration of authority and responsibility at the top of the organization. The more work and power that stays at the top, the more centralized the organization is. The more work and power that stays at the top, the more centralization the organization is. And the latter is about how the authority and responsibility remains at the top level. Power stays at the top, units have little independence. And in the case of decentralization, the power flows downward, the units operate independently. Therefore, decentralization means the flow of power is downward and units operate independently. That is, decentralization means the division of group of functions and the division of group of activities into relatively autonomous units which overall which have overall authority and responsibility for their operations delegated to each head of each unit.